It is a cold Tuesday morning, and you are sitting in your car in a parking garage, engine off. You are watching the number on your phone screen. Your net worth just crossed $100,000. Nobody around you knows. The man 2 spaces over is scraping ice off his windshield. The woman at the elevator is on a call about a deadline. The fluorescent light above you flickers in that way it always does. Somewhere a level below, a car alarm chirps once and goes silent. And you are sitting very still because something just happened that does not announce itself. There was no email, no ceremony, just a number that tipped over a line you have been walking toward for years. You feel the heater ticking as it cools. You feel the strange quiet of a milestone that the world will never congratulate you for. Here is what nobody tells you about this exact moment. The first 100,000 is not about the money. It is proof that you can hold a position. Most people never get here, not because they cannot earn it, but because they cannot keep it long enough to compound. You just proved you can. So let me show you what comes next, because the next 6 levels do not look anything like the climb you just finished. Level 1. $100,000. This is the level where money stops leaking. Picture the same man a week later, standing in a grocery aisle, holding 2 brands of the same thing. For most of his life, this was a small calculation, the cheaper one, always. This morning he notices he simply does not care. He picks the one he wants and walks on. It is such a quiet thing that he almost misses what it means. That night, an unexpected bill arrives, the kind that used to set off a chain reaction of dread. He pays it without the room going cold. The dread is simply gone, replaced by something flat and steady that he does not yet have a word for. For most of your life, money behaved like water in cupped hands. It came in, and it found a crack, a car repair, a holiday, a bad month, and it left. At this level, for the first time, the hands seal. You build the buffer that means a flat tire is an annoyance and not a crisis. You stop paying the poverty tax, the late fees, the minimum payments, the emergency borrowing at terrible rates. You start to notice that the dollars you keep are beginning to throw off small dollars of their own. It is barely visible, a few hundred a month from interest and dividends, easy to dismiss. Do not dismiss it. That trickle is the single most important signal in this entire video. Do not dismiss it. It means the machine has switched on. He could now make a decision based on what was smart rather than what was urgent. He could wait. He could walk away from a bad deal. He could let an opportunity come to him instead of grabbing the first one out of fear. This is the first thing nobody tells you about net worth. The earliest level is not about getting rich. It is about becoming someone whose money no longer escapes. At this level, you learn to stabilize. Level 2. $250,000. This is the level where you separate. A friend calls with a weekend job, cash, a favor really, the kind of thing he would have said yes to without thinking a few years ago. He catches himself doing the math differently this time. Not the math of the cash, but the math of the weekend. He says no, kindly, and he notices the friend is surprised. Up to now he has moved through the same world as everyone he grew up with. Same anxieties, same conversations, same quiet arithmetic at the end of the month. Somewhere in this range, that begins to change, and the change is mostly internal. You stop checking your account before small purchases. You start declining things, a side gig, a draining favor, a bad client, not because you are above them, but because your time is finally worth more than the cash they offer. The people around you do not see $250,000. They see that you seem calmer, less reachable, harder to rattle. What is actually happening is that a gap is opening between you and the version of you that lived paycheck to paycheck. You are separating from your old financial self. This is also the level where the dangerous voice arrives, the one that says you have made it, that you can ease off now. That voice has ended more wealth journeys than any market crash. The people who break through this level treat the $250,000 not as an arrival, but as a base camp. They keep the same habits that got them here while their peers quietly relax theirs. They watch friends at the same level buy the upgraded car, the bigger lifestyle, and slide back down without ever understanding what happened. That is the whole game at this stage. Hold the discipline precisely when it stops feeling necessary. This is the second thing nobody tells you about net worth. The most dangerous moment is not when you are struggling. It is the first time you feel comfortable. At this level, you learn to separate. Separate. Level 3. $500,000. This is the level where you compound. One ordinary evening, he opens the account out of habit, and sees that the balance has grown more in a single month than he earned that month at work. He reads it twice. Then he closes the app and sits with it. Something just rearranged itself in his head, and it will not rearrange back. Here the math finally turns and starts working harder than you do. At $500,000 invested, a normal market year can add more to your net worth than your salary does. The first time you watch that happen, it changes you permanently. You realize you have crossed from a world where you trade hours for money into a world where money trades for more money while you sleep. The temptation at this level is to get clever, to chase the exotic trade, the hot sector, the thing a friend swears by. Resist it. The people who win here are almost boring. They let the compounding do the loud work, and they refuse to interrupt it. They understand that the greatest threat to $500,000 is not a bad investment. It is an impatient owner who keeps yanking the plant out of the soil to check the roots. You also start, quietly, to think in decades instead of months. A purchase is no longer just a price. It is the future value of that money compounding, the real cost of the thing. This single mental shift, seeing the decade behind every dollar, is what truly separates this level from the ones below it. You are no longer saving. You are allocating. Once you can feel the difference between those two words, you do not go back. This is the third thing nobody tells you about net worth. At the higher levels, your patience becomes more valuable than your income. At this level, you learn to compound. Compound. Level 4. $1 million. This is the level where you insulate. The word millionaire still carries a charge, and crossing it does something emotional even to people who saw it coming for years. He expected to feel different. What he actually feels is a new and unfamiliar kind of caution. The caution of a man who finally has something real to lose. The real change is structural, not emotional. At $1 million, you build the walls. You stop being exposed to single points of failure. One job loss cannot sink you. One bad year cannot erase you. You spread across assets that do not all move together, so that when one zigs, another holds. You start caring about things you never thought about before, about tax efficiency, about which account holds which asset. This is the level where defense quietly becomes as important as offense. The newly minted millionaire who fails is almost always the one who keeps playing pure offense. The job is no longer only to grow the number. It is to make the number unkillable. You begin to think like an institution rather than an individual, asking not just what is the upside, but what would it take to wipe me out completely, and then engineering that scenario away. You buy the boring insurance. You keep the unglamorous reserve. This is the fourth thing nobody tells you about net worth. The first million is when you stop trying to win and start refusing to lose. At this level, you learn to insulate. Insulate. Level 5. $5 million. This is the level where you deploy. Everything before this was about your money working for you. Here, for the first time, you start putting money to work in the world. 5 million is roughly the line where true work optional status becomes real, where the income from your assets alone can fund a good life indefinitely without you lifting a finger. And the strange thing, the thing almost nobody outside this level believes, is that almost nobody who reaches it actually stops. Because the goal was never to stop working. It was to choose the work. You begin to deploy capital with intention into private deals, into businesses, into other people who are climbing the early levels you already cleared years ago. You become, whether you plan to or not, a source of capital rather than only a holder of it. People start bringing you opportunities instead of you chasing them. The rooms you sit in are full of people who think the way you now think, in decades and in structures. The conversations stop being about salaries and start being about ownership, about who controls what, about where the real leverage sits. The risk here is boredom dressed up as ambition, the urge to make a dramatic move just to feel the old thrill of the early climb. The people who keep ascending resist the theatrics. They deploy carefully, repeatedly, into things they actually understand. There is a second risk too, quieter and more dangerous. At 5 million, the requests begin. Family, friends, founders, every one of them sincere, every one of them certain that a number like yours can absorb the ask without noticing. 1,000 small yes is how a fortune quietly bleeds out while its owner feels generous. They build a system for saying no. They give deliberately, on their own terms. This is the fifth thing nobody tells you about net worth. The point of financial freedom is not to do nothing. It is to deploy yourself into exactly what you choose. At this level, you learn to deploy. Deploy. Level 6. $20 million. This is the level where you command. At $20 million, you are no longer a participant in the system. You begin to direct small parts of it. Your capital is large enough that it has weight, that it can move a deal, anchor around, decide whether something gets built or quietly does not. You stop managing money personally and start commanding the people and the structures that manage it for you. There is a team now, advisors, lawyers, an accountant who thinks 3 years ahead. A person whose entire job is the protection of your time. The character from the parking garage, the man who once compared 2 grocery brands, would not recognize his own calendar. The danger at this level is invisible, and it is entirely about attention. The thing most likely to erode you is no longer the market. It is your own loss of focus. Their scarcest resource is no longer money, and no longer even time. It is judgment, applied to a small number of decisions that actually matter. They say no to almost everything. They build a life with very few inputs and very high standards for each one. They command by subtraction. They let the structure they have spent 2 decades building simply run. There is something else that happens at this level that nobody warns you about. The people around you stop telling you the truth. Your advisors are paid by you. Your friends are aware of what you are worth. The honest, abrasive feedback that sharpened you on the way up gets quieter. The ones who keep commanding go out of their way to keep 1 or 2 people in their life who will still tell them they are wrong. They treat blunt honesty as a luxury more valuable than any asset on the balance sheet. This is the 6th thing nobody tells you about net worth. At the top levels, wealth is not managed by working more. It is commanded by deciding less and deciding far better. At this level, you learn to command. Command. Level 7. $100 million. This is the level where you endure. At 100 million, the conversation is no longer about you at all. Your capital is now large enough that it owns things other people depend on. The building where someone runs the business that feeds their family. The company where hundreds of people collect a paycheck they never think twice about. The land a small town is quietly built around. You have crossed, almost without noticing the line, from having wealth to being part of the infrastructure of other people's lives. And the central question changes completely. It is no longer how do I grow this? It is how does this outlast me? You start thinking in terms that have no natural endpoint, in structures and trusts and entities designed to carry the thing forward long after you are gone, in names that are not yet born. The number stops being a score and becomes a responsibility you did not entirely choose. The people who reach this level and waste it are the ones who never make that shift, who keep treating 9 figures as a personal trophy to be polished and shown. The ones who matter understand that at this scale you are a steward of something much larger than yourself. And the only goal left worth having is to make it endure. Far below all of this, in a cold parking garage on an ordinary Tuesday, a man is watching his phone tip past $100,000, feeling completely alone with a milestone no one in the world will celebrate. He does not know yet that the quiet discipline of this exact morning is the identical discipline that, scaled up and held across decades, ends right here. At the level where a person's money becomes something the world itself leans on. This is the 7th thing nobody tells you about net worth. At the highest level, the money is no longer truly yours. You are simply the one trusted to carry it forward. At this level, you learn to endure. Endure. The payoff. So let me give it all back to you in one breath, because the pattern only reveals itself when you see the whole ladder at once. At the first 100,000, you stabilize. At a $250,000, you separate. At a $500,000, you compound. At $1 million, you insulate. At $5 million, you deploy. At 20 million, you command. And at 100 million, you endure. 7 levels, 7 verbs, and notice what they actually do. They start as things you do to your money, and they end as things your money does to the world. Here is the thing nobody on YouTube will tell you about net worth. The dollar amounts are not the levels. The dollar amounts are just the visible shadow of an internal change. From someone who chases money, to someone who holds it, to someone who allocates it, to someone the rest of the world quietly depends on. The number on the screen is only ever a measure of which version of yourself you have become. Most people obsess over the number and never do the internal work, which is exactly why most people stall at the very first level and never once understand why. Remember the man in the parking garage? Engine off, heater ticking as it cooled. He thought he had reached something. What he had actually done was qualify. He had earned the right to start a climb most people never even see the beginning of. The discipline that got him to that quiet morning is the identical discipline, only scaled, that carries a person all the way to owning what others depend on. Same man, same habits, different altitude. If this video changed how you think about net worth, hit subscribe. This channel is built for the version of you that is climbing quietly while everyone else is busy talking. The first 100,000 is the hardest one you will ever earn. Go get the proof that you can hold a position. Then come back, and we will climb the next level together.